everyone, and welcome to this session of our marriage course. And I have the privilege this evening of the delicate subject of talking about sexuality. Now, the dictionary, or one of the dictionary definitions of the word honeymoon, is this: a period of unusual harmony following the establishment of a new relationship. Isn't it really sad that the world looks at the honeymoon portion of the marriage as being the highlight, the climax, the kind of the mountaintop experience, and from then it's kind of like the slide into average. It's such a sad view of marriage. It's such a sad view of the intimacy of marriage. If I think of people over the years whose marriages I've admired, whose marriages I've thought to myself, if we could have that, if Heidi and I could have that, that would be so beautiful. Their marriage has always had a very healthy life of intimacy and sexuality. I've yet to meet a couple whose marriage I wanted to emulate or copy or desired to have for ourselves, that didn't have a very healthy and a very whole sex life and life of intimacy. In fact, Paul, who cannot be considered a romantic by any stretch of the imagination, writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and I think it's verse 5, where he says that a husband and a wife may only separate themselves from each other sexually for short periods of time, and only in the case of prayer and fasting, which means he either anticipated that husbands and wives would have healthy and frequent sex life, or he was saying that we need to have really long times of prayer and fasting. And I don't think that is what he was talking about. Now, the first thing I would like to cover this evening is this subject of intimacy. I'm going to cover 3 points: intimacy, romance, and sex. And the first thing I would like to cover is intimacy. Intimacy is possibly the most distinguishing characteristic of your marriage relationship. If you think about it, you can talk to other people, you can touch other people, you can touch somebody of the opposite sex, you can talk to somebody of the opposite sex, you can share deep things, you can share your emotions with somebody of the opposite sex. So touch and communication and those things are not what define your marriage. They're not the exclusive property of your marriage, but the depth to which you take those, the depth to which you communicate, the extent to which you touch, that intimacy becomes the exclusive property of marriage. And intimacy is the thing that distinguishes, or should distinguish, your relationship with your spouse from your relationship with every other person of the opposite sex. Do you know that God is an intimate God? Intimacy is a quality of God, and it reflects our relationship with God. We are called to an intimate relationship with God. Psalm 27 verse 5 says this: "One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold or gaze upon his beauty, his graciousness, his pleasantness, and to inquire of him in his temple." That's describing a very intimate relationship that was the desire of David's heart. In the last few verses of Jeremiah chapter 9, the scripture says this: "Let not the wise man boast of his wisdom, let not the mighty man boast of his might, let not the rich man boast of his riches, but let him who would boast," another version says, "let him who would glory in this, that he understands and knows me." That's God speaking. If you want there to be a boast and a glory of your life, let it be this: that you understand and know God. Now, the Hebrew word that is used there to know God is the exact same word that is used in Genesis chapter 4 verse 1, where it says, Adam knew Eve. And obviously he's talking there about knowing her sexually. In fact, the NIV puts it like this: Adam made love to Eve. And so this same word that is translated as a husband making love to his wife is the same word used to describe the way that we know God. Friends, there is an intimacy to our relationship with God that is the hallmark, the exclusive property of our marriage. Now, I'm sure many people have defined this word intimacy. I think if I was to define it, I would say this: intimacy is when all of me is familiar and comfortable with all of you. And so if I say that to my spouse, who is not here right now, but I would say this: intimacy between Heidi and I is when all of me is familiar and comfortable with all of her. We all understand sexual intimacy. It's when my body is comfortable and familiar with her body. It's when I know and appreciate her body. So I think we generally understand what sexual intimacy is. But what about emotional intimacy? What about the intimacy that affects the other areas of our life? See, if my wife was to walk in from the bathroom one evening and take off her gown, and I was to laugh, I would trash sexual intimacy. But what happens when my wife comes into my study in the middle of the day and I'm busy preparing, and she's got this dream, she's got this thought, she's got this desire? It's generally, if it was Heidi, it's to do with renovating the house or knocking down a wall or something. But if she comes into my space and she shares very vulnerably this dream that she's got, or this thought that she has, or this perspective that she has on something, if I then laugh at that, I don't trash her sexual intimacy, but I trash her emotional intimacy, and she builds up a little wall around her. See, I honestly think that true intimacy is when all of me is safe with all of you. All of me, Ed Strong, is safe with all of Heidi Strong. So my body is safe. My sexuality is safe. My overtures are safe. My hesitancy is safe. But my soul is also safe. My private world, my fears and failures, my hopes and dreams, my thoughts, my crazy adventures that I'm so hesitant to speak about. Though intimacy is when those things are safe with my spouse. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 25 describes the relationship of Adam and Eve like this. It says, "The man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed." The Living Bible says this: "Now, although the man and his wife were both naked, neither of them was embarrassed or ashamed." See, intimacy is about being naked in body and comfortable. But it's also about being naked in your soul, where all of me, my emotions, my thoughts, my opinions, they matter, they are respected. That's what intimacy is. And friends, intimacy is not about the few moments at the end of the day in the bedroom. Intimacy is about the way you relate. It's about the whole of your life. You've created an environment where intimacy is the flavor. And occasionally, hopefully more often than not, it's what takes place in the bedroom, but it is the nature of your marriage. Now, there are a number of ways that you trash intimacy within marriage. And the first way, and possibly the most overt way, is when you take intimacy outside of marriage, be it adultery, be it homosexuality, be it pornography, or any of those perversions. The only sex that God smiles on is the sex that takes place between a man and a woman in the bond and the covenant of marriage. And friends, we have to just go back to the Bible on that truth and state it the way it is. The only naked body that God will ever smile at you, smiling at, is the body of your spouse. And when we take sexuality or intimacy outside of that bond, and I love the fact that the word is used of bond. Back in the day, they spoke about posting the bond of marriage, because there is a belonging and there is a bonding that takes place. And the way we trash intimacy is to take that intimacy outside of marriage. Let me just say one other thing. You see, sex is contained with intimacy, not the other way around. And it's not just about giving of your body that trashes intimacy, that takes it outside of the confines of the marriage. You can share your body too much with somebody else, but you can also share your words. You can also share your feelings, and you can also share your emotions with somebody else. That, in a sense, becomes adulterous. See, adultery is not just giving of your body where you shouldn't. It's not just taking of your body outside of the confines of marriage, but it's taking your soul outside of that. And please hear this, dear friends. You don't only commit adultery. You don't only trash intimacy by what you do with your physical body. We understand that very, very well. But you also trash intimacy by taking that depth of communication, that weight of touch that is the exclusive realm of your marriage. I hope that has come across clearly. And so we trash intimacy, first of all, by taking it outside of the marriage relationship. But the other way, and perhaps for many of us, the far more subtle way that we trash intimacy is through neglect, where intimacy is not the priority. Here's the thing, friends. Intimacy is not just about what you keep out of your marriage. It's about what you keep in your marriage. The more vulnerable Heidi and I are within marriage, the less vulnerable we are from without our marriage. And so it's not just about building a fence to keep stuff out. You can keep pornography out. You can keep perversion out. You can keep adultery out. That doesn't mean that you've kept something in that is beautiful and of value. And so for some of you, maybe there is a caution of taking intimacy outside. But for others, there's maybe this word this evening that says, am I making it a priority within? The second point I'd like to make is the point of romance. And I'm going to do this very briefly because of our time constraints. But I think romance is this. I think romance is the environment you create in which intimacy flourishes. Can I say that again? I think romance is the environment you create in which intimacy flourishes. Intimacy is the experience, but romance creates the environment. And sadly, and probably more so for guys, romance has become a personality thing. Well, I'm just a romantic kind of guy. You hear people say that he's a romantic, or he's not romantic. I don't think we have an option about whether we are romantic or not, because I don't think romantic is personality. I think romance is chosen. And when you do romantic things, and by the way, romance is more about thought and time than cost and money. When we are regularly romantic and create a romantic environment, somehow intimacy flourishes. It's a really, really good thing you can do is a romantic investment. So I'd like to come to the third point, which is the point of sex. Not the point of sex, but point number 3, which is sex. And it's funny that when Hards and I counsel couples where there has been adultery, most times the the offending party will say this, oh, it wasn't about the sex. We just really connected in our hearts, as if somehow, that kind of makes it less of a sin or justifies it in some way. But it wasn't really about the sex. And then I'll generally ask them this question, well, how many times did you have sex? And suddenly you realize that these guys were just nothing short of, a rabbit warren, actually. They just went at it the whole time. But it wasn't really about the sex. Well, then why did they have sex so much? See, it is actually about the sex, and even the guys who manage to not go all the way, as again, some people pride themselves about the fact that they had an affair, but they didn't go all the way. But certainly there was lots of kissing and cuddling and fondling and caressing and arousing and climaxing on the way. They just managed to stop short of getting to Johannesburg. It's like they hit Benoni and then they stopped right there. And the point is this. Friends, is that sex is really important, and that's a whole subject all by itself. But the thing that I want to leave with you this evening is, number one, that you see sex within the broader umbrella of intimacy, that you see sex as being vital and important because it fosters and it nurtures and it bonds intimacy. And the second thing is that you make it a priority, because so often with Heidi's and our marriage counseling, this issue of sex comes up. And I don't know that there is, 3 steps to a happy sex life or 7 steps to a happy sex life. But I do know this. You need to make it a priority, and it's worthwhile making a priority. I was thinking of just the stages that couples go through in their married life. Heidi and I have been married for 36 years now, and we don't think that's very long, by the way. We think we're still pretty young. But you just think of the stages that people go through with regards the sexuality of their marriage. And there are stages when it's just so frequent and quantity seems to overtake quality. And I guess there's a time when you think about sex so much that the thought of not thinking about it is not even a thought. And then there are other times when the sexuality of your marriage is just blissful. And forgive me for saying this, but I think there are times in your married life when you think, actually, if it carries on like this, one day they're going to just find you both dead. You both had a heart attack and tangled in bed. It was just so amazing. But then there are other times you go through, and there are times when you're distracted, and there's times when the stress has got the better of you. And then there are times when your body might be changing, or you're just really tired, or you go through periods of bad health. There are stages that we go through. There are stages when you just don't have the desire. And then there are other stages where you have the desire, but you just don't have the performance. And then there are other stages where, quite honestly, you just need help. May I say this, friends, that no matter where you are in the sexuality of your intimacy, and I choose those words very, very carefully, always keep it a priority. Always keep intimacy a priority, and always keep sexuality, always keep your sex life a priority. And if you find that there are extended periods, if you just have a bad week, please don't fret about that. But if you find there are extended periods where it's just not working and it's just not fulfilling, at least talk about it to each other. And if you need to, get help. And by the way, it doesn't help to worry. Worry is the worst thing for a sex life that's struggling. But go and get help. And if you need to, go and see a doctor. But don't settle for second best. Don't settle for just cohabitating. If something has happened in your past that is a recurring nightmare, and it is affecting your sex life between you and your husband, I ask you, please, go get the counsel, go get the healing, go get the deliverance, but don't let your marriage be robbed of this vital part. So intimacy, romance, which is the environment in which intimacy flourishes, and then sex, which is part of intimacy, and such an important thing. I'd like to leave you with this thought. And Obviously, this subject is so huge, and I've just touched on one or two things as I felt was important to do. There's a wonderful parable in Luke chapter 16, and I haven't got time to go through the whole parable, but a worldly man uses very worldly means to sort out his future when things are going bad. And this is what the scripture says. It says, the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than the people of light. Now we know that in the world at the moment there is sexual freedom that has just gone crazy. It's reached the realm of perversion. We know that. But sometimes we as Christians are so far on the other side that we just don't even talk about it. And please hear me carefully. I'm not saying go and read Men's Health. I'm not saying go and read Cosmopolitan. But I am saying that sometimes, because they just are way too blatant about this stuff and way too liberal. But what I am saying is that sometimes a little bit of just plain investigating your biology will help you. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm sure there's going to be an interesting discussion that follows this. And most of all, I pray God's blessing, God's fullness on your marriage, and for those of you who will be married, for your future marriage. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.